TV down, Maggie.
Hey guys, welcome to the 6th installment of The Smartest People in the Room. I am thrilled to be hosting this from one of Nashville's most popular and well-run venues, the Acme Feed and Seed on Lower Broadway. Acme is run by one of my heroes, Tom Morales. Tom is easily one of the smartest people in any room he ever enters, and it's an honor to be broadcasting today's segment from one of his many establishments. Acme is currently closed due to Tom's well-reasoned, morally correct approach to dealing with COVID. Unlike many other bar owners up and down Lower Broadway, Tom is doing the right thing by all people, most importantly, Acme's customers and employees. His leadership throughout COVID has been exemplary and is a model for many others to follow. Before we get started, I want to thank all of our sponsors who, without their support, we could not do what we do. First Horizon Bank, Bufkin Baker, which by the way is the search firm that I work for. Many of you out there know what I do, but I'm a headhunter in the music industry. Four Roses Bourbon, Fairlane Hotel, Core Power Yoga, Tennessee Entertainment Commission, Lightning 100, Tennessee Brew Works, Moo TV, Jive Printing, Project Music, and Also Organics. We're going to hear a little bit more about Also Organics later today. This is a high-end brand of CBD products. But more on that later. So let's get this started. I am so pleased to invite back to this series the woman whom we built the very first program around. That's Karen Allen. Previously, Karen was interviewed by Jim Griffin, and she was so impressive that we devised a clever way to lure her back into the room by asking her to occupy the interviewer's chair for today's program. A little bit about Karen Allen. She created Twitch for Musicians, which is a website, twitchformusicians.com. It's also a book and an online course now in its second edition, and it demystifies the process of producing and growing a channel on Twitch. She's produced live streams for Loma Vista Recordings, Road Nation, and rap artist K Camp. She features artists on the In Rotation channel on Twitch and produces the Marina V music channel and also manages Megan Linnaeus, a top music streamer. She's also a strategy and business development consultant to tech startups in music and entertainment, and has held executive positions at the RIAA, Mobile Ecosystem Forum, and Tag Strategic. And her involvement with Tag Strategic is the perfect segue to today's featured guest on The Smartest People in the Room, Mr. Ted Cohen. Known throughout the entertainment and technology as part connector, part evangelist, and always a futurist, Mr. Ted Cohen is currently the managing partner of Tag Strategic, a digital entertainment consultancy based in Los Angeles, and concurrently serves as head of corporate development for Media Tech Ventures, an Austin-based incubator and accelerator. Previously, as SVP for EMI Music, Ted led global digital business development for this iconic label and was instrumental in crafting the licensing agreements upon which the iTunes Store and Rhapsody Napster services were built. During that time, EMI led the industry by embracing and exploiting new tech and business models such as digital downloads and streaming music subscriptions, wireless services, high-def audio, and internet radio. Prior to EMI, Cohen co-founded and chaired the groundbreaking Web Noise conferences. Ted has also led consulting adults with clients such as Universal Studios, Amazon, Microsoft, DreamWorks Records, Liquid Audio, and Napster. Ted has also held senior positions at both Warner Brothers and Philips Electronics. A 40-year entertainment media veteran, Cohen conceived, created, and chaired MedemNet, and also served on the Grammy LA Board of Governors and Grammy National Trustee Board. Additionally, Cohen served as chairman of Mobile Entertainment Forum America and on the board of Mouse.org, an innovative computer literacy program. In 2013, Ted received the NARM Presidential Award, previously awarded to Amit Erdogan and Dick Clark, among others. Ted continuously looks to work on the next innovative technology and his next challenge. He really loves his life. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome Karen Allen and Ted Cohen into the room today. Take it away, guys.
Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. It's wonderful to have you here.
That was a fantastic introduction and saved me a lot of work in recapping Ted's career,
I'm all about help.
which,
So
yeah, yeah, which is
Karen is going to keep me on track today and basically rein me in. For those of you who know us, it's going to be a great show here.
yeah, yeah. So Ted and I actually worked together twice. So he hired me as the general manager for the Americas at the Mobile Entertainment Forum, which is now the Mobile Ecosystem Forum. So we worked there for a couple of years. At the time, Ted was the chairman of the Mobile Entertainment Forum. And we worked there at a really interesting time. We didn't have the app markets that we have now. There was no Apple app market, there was no Android app market. So if you wanted to have entertainment on a phone, there were, 3 to 5 provisioners, and were you on carrier or off carrier? It was an interesting time to be part of all that. So Ted and I sort of ran the ecosystem of all those companies in the Americas, and then I signed on to work for him at Tag, and I was there for about 5 years, and we worked on about 80 clients or so together. So we have quite a history together, on top of being in the very first cycles of digital music, on in similar sides of the fence, right around Napster. So I worked for the RIAA when they were suing Napster. At the time, Ted was at EMI. So we've definitely done the conference circuit together. So I've known this man for a very long time. Had
And
a
still,
great
she
time.
agreed to do this.
Here I am. I keep getting sucked back in. I don't know what it
I
is, but here we are. And it's always an enlightening conversation. Ted seems to be in the mix with things that other people generally aren't privy to, a little bit ahead of the curve on things, and just generally aware of everything that's going on. And what I know for sure is that comes from a general interest in what's happening within digital entertainment, what that means for fans and content creators and also companies, and where that drives us forward. And it's been an inspiration to me in my career for sure. I've kind of covered his background. I want to talk a little bit about what it means to Ted to work with people, especially younger people, people who are coming up in the industry. He was certainly a mentor for me. I knew for sure everybody who came into our office who worked for us, it was a matter of, do they share the same passion for this industry that we do? Are they as smart and curious, even though they may not know everything we know? Are they smart and curious? And do they want to be mentored? Do they really want this opportunity? Are they marking time? We weren't interested in time markers. We were interested in people who were truly interested in being mentored. So Ted, I'm wondering with you, when did this sense of paying it forward and the necessity of it and the idea of mentoring people become valuable to you?
So this is not a sponsor of mine, but this is probably my 5th this morning. So I'm
I
okay.
maintain that is the best diet soda ever, by
It's
the
the
way.
best. I mean,
It
I've got
really
I've
is.
got 4 12-packs under the desk here. So when Karen and I spoke last week, and I always hate to refer back to when we had the prep session, but when we spoke, it's very important to me to get across to everybody that I'm doing what I'm doing now because of people who, I use the term, adopted me. In high school, I managed bands. I managed Eric Carmen all by myself. And I went off to Ithaca College and was in pre-med and ended up switching to communications and started putting on shows and managing bands, etc. I spent too much time doing that, not going to class, and I got sent home for a semester and ended up talking my way into a local college in Cleveland, John Carroll University. And I ended up 2 weeks later running the radio station. And 2 weeks after that, my parents threw me out for running the radio station because I was doing the same thing I did that got me in trouble at Ithaca. And because of that, I ended up meeting a bunch of people from the music business in Cleveland, one of them being a guy named Billy Bass. And Billy Bass was a DJ at Wixie 1260. It was a top 40 station in Cleveland. Billy adopted me, and he started introducing me to people. And he introduced me to the folks at Columbia Records. He introduced me to his roommate. His roommate ended up hiring me to be the co-buyer for a chain of 34 stores. I ended up stopping going to school with the intention of going back to Ithaca the next semester. Never made it back. And I all of a sudden I'm buying for 34 stores, and I'm meeting Neil Bogart, who was at Buddha Records at the time, went on to do Casablanca. I'm doing this quickly, Karen. I met a ton of people, and I met the folks from Columbia, and I met a guy named Frank DeLeo and Marty Mooney and Steve Popovich. And they said, you should be doing local promotion. There's a job in Cincinnati. Go down there and interview for it. And I went down and interviewed for the job. And I called them afterwards and I said, when will I know if I got it? And they said, no, you had it when you drove down there. You just had to do the interview. And they basically jump-started my career. Frank went on to manage Michael Jackson. Steve Popovich went on to leave Columbia and sign Meatloaf with one of the biggest albums ever. But these were guys who like took care of me. Billy continued to be a friend. So when I got my first job, I started basically finding people that were passionate, as Karen said, and not to put this on a downer, but there was a guy in Cincinnati, Mike Herron, and Mike started doing mailings for me. He would come to the office, come first to my apartment, then we opened the WIA office in Cincinnati, and he would do the weekly mailings to the radio stations that were not in Indianapolis, Columbus, Cincinnati, et cetera, to all the small town radio stations. And I said, if I end up moving up in Warner, you're going to get my job. 2 years later, I got promoted into artist development, and I insisted they hire Mike. 6 months later, he resigned. He said he realized when he was working firsthand that the music business was a lot of unsavory characters, and he didn't want to do that. He spent the last 30, 40 years working at NBC in New York. He passed away from the COVID virus 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago now. But he was somebody who always had the passion for music, always had the passion for all of this. And it's validated. Lester Holt on the network news the day he died talked about Michael, his cameraman. I don't think I've ever heard that before on television, where they're going, hey, the guy who did our audio, whatever. They literally did a segment on him on the network news and then on the NBC local news about what a great guy he was. So it's been my thing, and I'm getting there. It's been my thing to, like, if I find people that are passionate and I find people that are, really into, whether it's music or film, or they're into producing, or they want to be a roadie or whatever the job is, I will be their biggest advocate, and I will support them. And if they start screwing up, I will pick up the phone and call them and say, you're screwing up. So over the years, I've ended up meeting a bunch of people that have helped me and people that I have helped. And there are folks, I will give one last example, and then Karen, you're back in charge. I got a call in 2001, and I have this very visual memory. I can tell you where I was when I got a phone call, or was whatever. I got a call from a guy named Scott Young. I'm standing in the Bellagio cafe in the Bellagio Hotel in Las Vegas. And he goes, hi, this is Scott Young. Do you remember me? I said, yeah. You were Clark Duvall's secretary at Capitol Records. He said, yes, you're the only guy who ever used to listen to what I had to say about what I wanted to do when I was no longer Clark Duvall's secretary. Nobody else wanted to hear what I had to say. I said, great. I said, what are you calling about? He said, well, I'm now global head of digital for Best Buy. What can I do for you? I said, what do you mean? He goes, you're the only person that ever helped me or never listened to me. And we ended up doing this amazing Rolling Stones promotion together. We had just done this deal with SanDisk to put the entire Rolling Stones catalog on a micro SD chip, and I needed distribution, and Scott made it happen. So there's this thing about paying it back, paying it forward, and it's been a consistent thing in my life to continually try and find people, and then give them a call saying, call this guy right away. He's waiting to hear from you. You've got there's a gig there for you. So Karen, back to you.
Back to me. Yeah, I mean, I actually even take a note from Ted's page on this and try to mentor people and find people that I think, are on the right path. Or I've even gotten into some tiffs on purpose with people in some forums that I actually quite respect, but are younger, because I think the challenge is needed, and I expect more from them than what they're showing, and I'm not.
Sometimes they bring a new perspective of ignorance to the conversation.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm like, well, yeah, you could have this perspective, or you could think a little further, and what about this? And it's a little bit of tough love, but I think that's needed. I think Ted and I both care about the next generation and what they're going to bring to everything.
You know, I don't want to out anybody, but there's a woman that I worked with, and I was at Philip. You mentioned I was at Philips Media, and I had ended up. I will also throw this in. I want this to be somewhat instructive. I ended up working for a guy named Sandy Gallen in the mid '80s. Sandy managed Dolly Parton, Mac Davis, Whoopi Goldberg, Neil Diamond, and he said to me one day, you know, hypothetically, did you get a hold of Tom Truitt? And I went, yeah, I left him a message. I didn't ask you if you left him a message. Did you get him on the phone? Did you get the deal signed? Did you get the check? Is the check in the bank? Was the check good? Is the deal done? Otherwise, don't tell me you left them a message. Because up until then, I thought it was really good that I was just returning people's calls. It was about getting it done. Right. And, you know, it's those things. So I had a woman who worked with me. I'll just say her name was Stacy. And it was her name. She hated working for me because I continually challenged her on how thorough have you been. And finally, one day she said, I'm leaving. And she went to work for DMX, the background music service at the time. And 6 months later, she wrote me saying, you drove me crazy. And every day I'm going, okay, what would Ted ask me to do if I was doing this now?
Right.
And she goes, I love you for it and I hate you for it. So, I mean, I'm as rough. I mean, people think I'm rough on people sometimes. I'm as rough on myself. And you have to hold yourself to a high standard. You have to basically, people are counting on us. I mean, when Karen and I worked on projects together, we literally, it was, you know, is this going to be successful or is this guy going to go to work for his father-in-law's business?
Right. Right. Well, I think that sort of bleeds over to how we used to approach our clients as well. And I always said that the benefit you get of hiring a consultant to help you with your company is that consultants, their job is to look at everything. You know, we're not just social media managers. We're not just salespeople. We're not just anything. Like our job is to know a little bit about everything. And I'm wondering, Ted, how do you keep yourself informed on everything? And what do you think that really brings to a client relationship?
Well, I read a lot. I play with stuff a lot. I mean, if you looked around our home, our sequestered office right now, the place is filled with all kinds of gadgets. I've been into technology, again, going back a little bit. Through a serendipitous thing, I met Jobs and Wozniak right as they started Apple. And Warner owned Atari, so I started getting into computers in around 77, 78. So technology has been a big part of my life. Another mentor of mine, Stan Cornyn, started a digital group at Warner in '82, talking about what was going to happen, what the CD was going to do to the music industry when it came out a year later. So I play with stuff. I mean, here, I'm going to reach over. And again, this is sort of a, let me see. Okay, they'll come out here. So I hold stuff up. These are Spectacle 3s. These are from Snapchat. They're their new 3D glasses that take video and take pictures.
Did those just come out? Or those
well, they came out about maybe 4 months ago.
So they're back on the Spectacle. I hadn't heard that. Wow.
Yeah, and they're really good. And the case charges them. You see these little lights in there, whatever.
Do they have the vending machines too?
No, the vending machines aren't happening right now. But what was interesting was I'm looking for who do I know at Snap that will, you know, let me play with these, because I'm writing reviews now. MediaTek Ventures, and if you go to MediaTek.ventures, there's a place there to sign up for our newsletter. I'm writing a review every week on various stuff. The new Sonos portable speaker, the Focusrite Duetto Solo that I'm using here for my mic. I'm doing all these reviews. I wanted to get a pair of the Spectacle 3s. And I started looking, and it turns out an old friend of mine, who I'll keep nameless so nobody chases her, she had been a PR person for DreamWorks Interactive. DreamWorks did a Jurassic Park video game back in '99. I was working for DreamWorks Records. We did the soundtrack to the video game. I met her at an in-store. She said, what else are you working on? I said, oh, I'm working with this new thing, Napster. She goes, I've heard of it. I said, we need a publicist. She became the publicist for Napster and was very visible for the next 2 years. And it had, I think, a good impact on her career. Anyway, I wrote her. I hadn't talked to her in 10 years. I wrote her and I said, I'd like to play with a pair of spectacles. She goes, call me tomorrow at 4. I need to know what you're up to. I want to hear from you. We spoke for about a half an hour. I get an email from her assistant a half an hour later saying they'll arrive tomorrow morning. And the next morning, their pair of glasses showed up. So again, it's this pay it forward thing. It just happened. I'm pretty sure I would have been able to find somebody to say, hey, I'm writing reviews. But it was the personal contact that allowed me to fast track that. You know, I try and experience as much of this stuff as possible. It could be more succinct answer. I try and play with everything. I learned years ago, and again, these are all little like life lessons. There's Howard Kalin and Mark Volman, and you know Mark, right, Tom? He's at Belmont. He's a professor of music at Belmont. They were the Turtles. Then they were Flo and Eddie. And their manager called me in I wouldn't say the year, and said, what do you think of their new single? I immediately said, it's fantastic. And, you know, you really like it? And I went, yes. Do you think it's a hit? Yes, absolutely. And the guy goes, okay, it was good talking to you. And the way he said it, I hung up and I went, oh, I got to go listen to this. It was a song called Nikki Hoy. It was about the leper colony in Molokai. It was not a hit single. It was a funny song. And from that point forward, when someone says, have you tried our app? No, not yet, but I'm going to try it tonight. Have you gone on our website? No, but I'm going to look at it now, or yes, I did, and this is what I think. Mm-hmm. I learned early on that we can't bluff. We have to basically, if we're going to represent, when Karen and I were working together, we had to be their best evangelist, their best advocate. We also had to be able to say to them, here's what's wrong with it. And we're not only are we bringing, ideas to it, we're bringing an outside perspective. And the problem for startups and the problem for bands, and Karen, this is the other thing Karen and I shared, is they're either in a hurry or there's dissent. I mean, a startup is made up of different people. A band is made up of different people. Sometimes they just don't have the same goals. So it's, what's the right mix of people? What's the right, what does the product do? What is the band's musical direction? There's parallels between startups and developing bands that, I've learned to apply. Karen and I have gone through this. Again, a client will say, could you get us a speaking panel, a slot at South by? Yes. Oh, okay. So when will we speak this year? No, not this year, next year. You're not ready. You've got not even a beta of the app, and nobody wants to see a PowerPoint anymore. So right. Our style, the style at TAG has been, we do gun control. We try and keep you from shooting yourself in the foot. So to say to a client, no, you can't be on a panel, but we're going to get some people together for drinks, and you're going to meet the people you need to meet. It's like playing the Viper Room instead of playing the Wiltern here in LA. So that's been a lot of it. So I refer to myself affectionately as an enlightened generalist. I know what someone who writes code does. I know what web development is. Other than using WordPress, could probably not do it myself very effectively, but I can speak to the issues around it. And I think, we've all been good at knowing the other side of the table, and knowing, and also what I believe, what I brought to it and what Karen's continued to bring to it is, since we've been on all sides of the table, we know how to negotiate from their side of the table. So, Universal Music, when we would bring someone in to do a deal, Universal knows that the client we're bringing in wants a deal. Why does Universal want that deal? What is that app or that service or that platform going to do beyond the advance to enhance what Universal is trying to accomplish? So we've been very good at, negotiating from, knowing what the other side of the table needs. And
and what they don't want. There's been plenty of times when, if I have to tell clients that that's not important to labels right now. It's not important to your target. That's not what they're working on. If you tell them X, Y, Z, it's not on their radar. Right. So you need to tell them A, B, C instead.
Right. Sure. And it's really like, when you're doing, again, it's artist development versus, startup, nurturing startups. I had a client a couple of years ago, and I won't say who it is. I took them in to see Fathom. Fathom is the service that puts events into movie theaters. So Roger Waters Live doing The Wall, the Metropolitan Opera doing the first thing of the season. And this was a VR company. And I said, what I want to talk to them about is for after it runs in the theaters, there'd be a second window where it would run on your VR system. He starts pitching the guy from Fathom on if you use our platform, no one will ever have to go to a movie theater again. Fathom was owned by the movie theaters.
No.
So this guy's sitting there saying, if you let us show this on our platform instead of showing it in the theaters, nobody has to go to a theater again.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there like I'm trying to kick him under the table.
Yeah. Well, speaking of never going to theaters again,
yes,
we're in a really interesting spot right now.
That was a great transition.
Thank you very much. I have learned from the best.
I always say we're Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. Go Ginger, go Ginger.
So, I mean, the pandemic obviously has changed many things, and sitting in, air conditioned rooms with 500 people is not on top of anybody's list right now. And AMC and all the others are flailing in the wind. And it's brought up a really interesting conflict over, gosh, I would say the last 5 to 6 years or whatever.
10 years. It started.
Has it been 10 years?
It started. The background is in November.
Well, let's say what it is first. Let's say what it is first.
Okay, I'm gonna say what the story is. So November 10th. I'm jumping in on you. November of 2010. Universal Pictures announced that they were going to make a movie called Tower Heist with Ben Stiller, Eddie Murphy, Casey Affleck, Precious. It was a great movie. Caper movie in New York, based in the Trump Tower in Columbus Circle. They were going to make it available for pay-per-view at home. If you wanted to just sit around with the family and watch it at home, it was going to be available. I think at the time it was going to be $50 per family, but that's still cheaper than going to the movies. The theater chain said, if you make the movie available day and date with the theatrical release, we won't show the movie and we won't show any Universal movies. And besides, it's a stupid idea. They had me with we don't want you to do this. When they said it's a stupid idea, if it's so stupid, let them do it. Do the test. Mm-hmm. Have a Ernst & Young or PricewaterhouseCoopers or Deloitte do an independent audit of how many people sign up for doing it, and we'll find out how stupid the idea is. Instead, Universal blinked and said no. 10 years later, the pandemic comes along, and there are pictures that have to go, somewhere. And so all of a sudden, we have release into the home. So Trolls World Tour, the sequel to the first Trolls animated movie, did $50 million.
It did better than the last entire run of Trolls, didn't it?
Exactly. No, it did great.
Theatrical run, maybe not DVD, but theatrical run. It did better in 8 weeks than it did the entire time it was on.
And then, last Saturday, I guess it was Saturday night, the new Jon Stewart movie. By the way, if you haven't seen it, please see it. Go online.
I watched it. It was great.
It's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. And it was $20, and you're going, well, it's $20, to see the movie. It's $30 or $40 to go around the corner here to the Regal Cinema with popcorn and soda, with whatever, no Reese's Pieces, but it's expensive.
$20 isn't even 2 tickets,
Right. It isn't even, And so we are watching a lot of movies, and it's going to be interesting because Universal has now said we're going to continue to do this after the theaters reopen, which they still haven't. AMC has fired the first shot back saying, if you do continue to do it, we're not going to show your movies. It's going to be really interesting here in Los Angeles at Universal City Walk, at the Universal City Walk AMC, that they're not showing Universal movies.
Right?
So,
yeah. But but here's the thing. Who has the leverage here? That's the big question.
I believe once the Pandora's box has been opened, I think the studios have the leverage because people now have experienced it.
Right.
And they have better TVs. They have larger, people are now arguing over 85, you go into Costco. I don't think most of the sets fit in the car anymore.
No, they don't, totally.
So you have a great, sound system, whether it's a Bose or whatever. You have a great little home theater. And now that people have experienced it, will they go back to the theaters? Yes, but I don't think they have to go back as quickly as they would have
Yeah.
had we not gone through this.
I mean, I think they'll go back, you'll go back for entertainment, date night or day out or whatever it is. And I think there are some movies that are just sort of better experienced in a theater. Obviously, all the action movies, the comic book movies and so forth, there's something to be said for having that experience. But for just kind of everyday stuff, I mean,
Yeah, but
there's
used
definitely
to,
movies that I don't go watch in the theater because it's too much of a pain in the butt, and I just as soon watch it at home. It's just not a movie that's going to rank as high as a theater experience for me.
well, my example, at the time, I mean, we lived right across from City Walk, and my example was Adam Sandler. I think Adam Sandler's funny. I think he does interesting movies, but there are movies that I literally wouldn't go across the street, Adam Sandler movies, to see. But I'd watch them at home on a Saturday night with a bunch of people.
Mm-hmm.
A few weeks after a few weeks after I made that statement at a conference, Netflix announced their deal with Adam Sandler, where you could watch Adam Sandler movies at home. He's not. This was right after Pixels died a horrible death. I mean, Adam Sandler's box office was going down and down, and yet people embarrassingly were going, I still think he's funny, but not funny enough to convince your wife, your girlfriend, your friends to go to a theater on a Saturday night to see it. If you can see it in your living room on Netflix whenever you want, it's great. So we have a business that's been a series of, we'll never do this. We're never going to embrace MP3s. They're going to kill the business. We're never going to do subscription. And, I've been lucky enough, and Karen and other people I've seen, Jason Fiber, and I saw Debbie Newman popped up here, a bunch of folks, to witness the fall of we'll never do that. And I think that's part of the gratification, is seeing those walls fall down. And I'd say, to a significant extent, we've been part of that transition. And it's sometimes doing, sometimes it's gaming the system. I won't go off on my Star Trek thing, but it's reprogramming the attack simulation on Star Trek. It's a famous story. So, I mean, we've done stuff where we've sort of said, yeah, we'll do that. Everybody's into it. And we've moved things forward by making sure that everybody didn't talk to everybody right away.
Right, right. Well, it's even affecting things like Oscar nominations and what's eligible. I mean, Spielberg has been fighting for a long time that the only films that should be eligible for Oscar consideration are ones that are released in an actual theater, and Amazon's been pushing back on that. And I mean, I think
Yes,
that
but
puts the whole thing on its head.
Netflix bought the Egyptian Theater in LA on Hollywood Boulevard.
Does it matter now? Does it matter now? If all the theaters are going to be pushing everything to VOD for the next 9 months anyway,
right.
Does it even matter? And is it just a matter of putting it on VOD before it goes on Netflix? Is that the criteria now?
There was a great app that I think we both saw called Tug, Tugg.
Yeah.
And what Tug let you do was get you a one-night theatrical release for your movie. And it was sort of like a Kickstarter campaign. You would say, if I can get 50 friends together to buy a $10 ticket to see my movie at the ArcLight here in LA, you would get Theater 17, and 50 of your friends would watch your movie in a theater, and you now, qualified for Oscar consideration. We went through a whole thing with the Grammy Tech Committee and the Grammys and the RIAA of what is considered, once digital became pervasive, what is a release? It used to be a release. At one point, labels in New York would get something into J&R Record World over by City Hall. And in LA, they would get something into Tower to say it's an officially released album. It got commercial release. Then the question of, if they're only releasing it on, iTunes or Liquid Audio or whatever it was at the time, is that a release? Now that's not an issue anymore.
Yeah.
Everything again. So this has been a really interesting time for all of us to watch we'll never do that. That will never happen. Fall one by one, and still things flourish.
Well, I feel like the pandemic is certainly accelerating things. I mean, and for me, what I'm working on right now is live streaming. And, seriously, 4 months ago, I was explaining to people what live streaming is and what happens on Twitch and what happens on Facebook and what happens on YouNow. And now the conversation is, what do I do? I know that it exists, but what's my strategy?
Right.
And I'm sort of seeing a similar thing, with VR and AR and so forth. a few years ago, I mean, you couldn't go to a conference without there being a whole track about VR. And there was
Right.
so much money being thrown into content creation. And I got to say, there are so many insanely cool experiences. And then there's this whole birth going on with you have the VR arcades you can go to and
Right.
experience everything, and they're super fun. And there seemed to be a lot of steam behind this. And then it just feels like, and maybe you
It's
might
still,
disagree, it feels a little deflated to me. And
mm,
I really felt like with the pandemic, we would see a burst around VR the same way we saw a burst around live streaming. When you're home and you don't want to be home and you want to feel like you're somewhere else, VR seems really perfect for that. AR seems perfect for that. Live stream certainly was really perfect for that. But I don't really feel like, that's not really been a big story. Is it just not a big story? And this is happening anyway? Should we be paying attention to VR? Like, I'll give you an
totally
example.
disagree.
Well, I'll give you an example. I mean, the Wave, has a ton of investment, and they were doing DJ live streams, in VR, and they've almost completely pivoted now to live streaming. And they basically
Right.
just
It's a
create
price
these
point.
worlds that they put into live streaming, but you don't need to have a headset at all to
Right.
experience it. You literally just experience it on Twitch.
Right. But that's the problem. I mean, there's a price point issue. Right now, an Oculus headset is $400 or $500. A Valve Index system. We've got a Valve Index VR system here at home that is, $1,200.
Well, the Go was the cheaper solution, but that was been discontinued.
Yeah, the Oculus Go. Yeah, the
Yeah.
Oculus Quest is the answer right now because it knows where you are without having locating beacons in the room. You can move around, but it's $400. It's all about price points, and I believe that the price point that's been bandied around is at $199. It will become a mainstream consumer thing. But what people are doing smartly, um, and I think this is good, is bundling everything right now into the label of immersive experiences. So is it AR? Is it VR? Is it XR? Is it holograms? Is it going to see Ronnie Dio and Frank Zappa in concert? In the hologram stuff. So if you lump it all, or at least gather it all under the umbrella immersive entertainment, things are going to surface right, quickly as great experiences. There are VR arcades around the country where you can go experience it as a family. You can play the VR version of laser tag. I don't think it's going to go away. I think it's poised right now to be as big as we hoped it would have been 10 years ago. But I still think we're at a price point issue. I will give one more digression. A guy named Mike Eschert and I was the co-host of his radio show for Sound and Vision magazine. And we came up with something, and we decided that the most important issue in any consumer electronics purchase is WAF. And what is WAF? WAF was wife acceptance factor. So one, how much did you spend on that? There were two things. There was what did it cost and what does it look like? And so when big box projection TVs came out in the mid 90s, those were not going in your wife or girlfriend's living room. They were going in the garage, in the man cave, whatever. Flat screen TVs came along, and all of a sudden, this is cool, and I can watch whatever I want here. Bose little square, little cube speakers in the corner were great. The Sherwin Vega towers that we wanted to have at one point, not so cool. So the combination of physical form factor and price have been the limiting factors in the hardware area and in the experience area. But there's some things I know. I mean, there's some things that are going to be done that I can't talk about that I think are going to jumpstart the AR VR experience. I mean, I think the biggest setback we had, and Karen and I, we both know him, is Rio from Magic Leap.
Yeah.
And Magic Leap failed miserably.
Well, they raised $1 billion and barely put a product out.
Yeah. Well, the problem is they put a problem was $2,500 for a consumer set of glasses. That's not a consumer product. $1,500 for Google Glass was not a consumer product. We're now down to $380 3D, the 3D video Spectacles 3, 380 is pricey. 200 would be better, but it's at least okay. So I'll get 3 less Postmates deliveries this week. I'll pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're at a good point. I think AR is going to be big, but AR, the problem is, we had Pokemon, which set a bar, and okay, what's the next Pokemon experience? And
right, there hasn't really been a what I call the killer app,
right.
which everybody kind of jumps on and everybody can find a way into. I mean, I think we definitely had that with Beat Saber, with
Yes.
music and VR, and was phenomenal with zero investment and basically grassroots marketing. It's just a fantastic product. But I haven't seen other VR games or apps be that thing that everybody has to have.
Well, we got this VR box. We're going off on a tangent here, but we got a VR boxing game that's it's Beat Saber, the boxing game with music. It's very addictive, and we've been using it. I did see a product last week, and I have a follow-up call with them tomorrow morning. There's a company out of Central Europe that has an amazing AR technology that puts the Transformers on Avenue of the Americas in front of Radio City Music Hall. But it's so good that the leg of the Transformer is behind one car and in front of another car. It knows where it is in relation, where the AR projection is in relation to the real stuff that's in the action. So it doesn't look like it's just being laid. It's getting better and better. Let's stop.
Yeah.
We can keep going on this.
Let's talk a little bit. I know there's a lot of interest in the chat about what's going to happen over, say, the next 9 months in terms of live experience and concerts. I was just reading today an article in The Guardian that Glastonbury is saying if they can't do Glastonbury in 2021, they'll never do another one again. They're basically just going to go bankrupt, and they're trying to figure out, how can we do this safely? Can there be some sort of quicker testing? What do you do?
I don't think that's going to happen, but I have to, here's my feeling on the live concert stuff right now. I think, what you're doing with Twitch is amazing. I think Evan Lowenstein is getting, a great chance to bring Stage at Home. They just hired Stephen White, ex of Dubset and ex of Grace Note, to be the CEO. I think all this is good. I think right now the drive-in concerts can be interesting. During the first burst of concerts, there were some really homegrown things where people were playing in their living room. I loved those. The more produced they try and get, the more apologetic it is for, well, you can't go to a live show, but here's almost a live show. We've got some fireworks in it, with the exception of being like what BTS did, which, they basically just went, they just swung for the rafters. Travis Scott's thing on Fortnite was amazing. Marshmallow's thing on Fortnite was a great first effort. But I think if we are trying to put a date on when we're going to fix all this, we're as dumb as some people on Pennsylvania Avenue. You can't just wish it away. It's not signing a peace treaty. It's not signing a, disarmament agreement. It's got to play itself out, and people have to be smarter. And Tom and I were talking before the show about, please wear a mask, everybody. I'll just leave it at that. It's not a political statement.
It's not.
And John Oliver said the greatest thing the other night. No, John Oliver said a great thing. If the Trump organization was smarter, they would have made 1 million red MAGA masks and had everybody in middle America walking around with, it is a nice mask, Tom, says Peggy. Everybody would be walking around with "Make America Great Again" on their face, whatever.
I think the same thing. You make a camouflage mask with an AR-15 on it, and you're going to sell like hotcakes. That's you got to meet them where people are.
Yes, I think the mask that Maggie did that says, "If you can read this, it's too close. You're too close." I think that for me that works. But anyway, just please wear a mask. But we have to plan right now for it's not going to be fixed in the next. At least it's not going to be fixed before the first of the year. That's for sure.
No,
I don't think it's going to be fixed until early spring. But I'm starting to get this morning. I got ads for shows in August that are really real shows, not virtual shows, that are selling tickets
for this August.
for this August.
Like next month?
Yes.
Where?
Saying,
Like what size venue?
I haven't had a chance to read it, so I'm not going to fake it because I'll end up in a leper colony. Um, I didn't get a chance to read it. I was like, really? But this was like, because I said, okay, well, you know, what platform is it on? And it went, no, it's tickets. And it wasn't a platform. It was an in-person festival. So it's a challenge. I mean, I think we just, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So I love the creativity. I mean, I always think, you know, that hard times, you know, breed like the next big idea. And I love this idea of drive-in concerts. I love the idea of all the live stream stuff that's happening. I just wonder though, and I think that I actually do think there can be a hybrid. I think you can sell maybe a third of a venue and then make up the rest on live streaming and geo-fence it so you kind of are touring. I think there are solutions like that. But you know, what is the actual reality of these? Like, what is your gut, the reality on the drive-in concerts? You can only let in so many cars, only so many people.
But it's
And
an
you're
experience.
still
It's
putting
an
on a
experience.
show.
It's
But,
an
but
experience.
can you make any money with that? Is that actually economically viable?
Well, that's when people have to scale down. And if you're doing it at a drive-in with a movie screen behind you, use some video projection. You don't have to have a fancy set. You can play with some stuff. The other opportunity we have here, and I don't think I've said this to anyone else, this just came to mind. When I first started going to CES in 1977, I wasn't interested in going to the Microsoft booth or the Sony booth or whatever. I used to say I would hug the side walls. I would find all these people with little 10 by 10 booths who had spent all their money to exhibit at CES. And I go, what are you doing? What are you up to? Tell me about the product. Tell me about the service. I think we're in that same position right now with what's happening online. I'm not so much interested in, and I like Garth Brooks and I like a lot of people. I'm clicking on a lot of living room concerts. There's a guy, Craig Greenberg, who's in New York, who's quite talented, and I met him on Brian Zisk's on the second San Francisco Music Tech thing that we did a couple weeks ago. And really good guy. Whenever I want to, I either will go listen to a replay of something he's done or catch him live. Judy Stakey, who I think, Karen, you know. Judy used to be at Warner Chapel. She's doing a Sunday afternoon discussion group on how to write music. There was a guy on there named Nico, and Nico, if you're on here, I still can't pronounce your last name, but I love you, talking about the intersection of AI and composition. So he's a songwriter who embraced AI and is now writing algorithms to take something he's written and extend it. So if he needs to write a bunch of underscore for a video game, he can take basically thematic stuff that he's done and extend it using algorithms he's written based around his own music. Mm-hmm. So I'm finding people like Craig, like Nico, like whatever. Jonathan Brooke, who I'd lost touch with, who I think is a great artist.
Who's doing very well on Facebook, by the way.
And she's doing great. And I happen to bump into
money on Facebook.
Right. So when I get these little messages that so-and-so's doing a living room concert, and again, I've spent a lifetime getting into the show for free. I am spending money on these living room concerts. There is a moral imperative that if I'm having a really great time, it isn't what's his name? It isn't Foo Fighters, and they're making millions. And who cares if somebody gave me a pair of tickets? So I'm buying merch from some of these people. Yeah. You think you end up having a closer relationship virtually than sometimes you have physically. And when Jonathan, for example, or Craig gives a shout out to someone they know really well, to a fan, that doesn't happen at a Gaga concert. You don't hear her from the stage going, "Oh, there's Karen in the third row. Hi, Karen, how are you doing?"
Right.
But getting
that truly is the magic, that give and take.
Right.
This is why I stopped everything I was doing a year ago and we just went full force into live streaming, because I've never seen anything like it for fan base building, for directly monetizing the fan base, and doing it honestly. I saw artists on Twitch who didn't make, any money on YouTube or Instagram or Spotify, literally had nothing out, but they were fully supporting themselves on Twitch by live streaming because they were able to create these intimate relationships with fans, to find fans, which is hard, really
Right,
hard.
right.
Create intimate relationships with them,
It is. It's
and
going for
to
the intimacy.
directly monetize that. And it was interesting to me how we had gone from being a fully, you know, reliance on labels and promoters and radio to the first wave of digital, making it so you could put out your own records through TuneCore and CD Baby. And we're in this now, other wave of live streaming where you don't even need CD Baby and TuneCore. You don't need to put a record out. You
Right,
can fully support yourself. And there are artists who are doing 6 figures a year. There's
right,
not many on Twitch, but there are that are doing this, and plenty of them, this is their full-time gig, and they don't have big sales. They don't have big streaming numbers. They don't have all the things that we say you're supposed to have, and we send, artists in fits and circles to try to get. And they don't have brands behind them either. They have nothing. They have their fans. It's a direct fan relationship, and I
well,
really
that's the
feel
thing. I mean,
it's all predicated on when you feel like you're getting something of value as a fan, then you want to give something of value. And if you have low engagement, low monetization options, and high engagement, high monetization options, people will go where they
right,
feel comfortable. But all of that is money, and you can work them up that sales funnel to get them to the high engagement, high monetization.
right.
And that is the entire magic. And I think that's honestly what's going to be, people need to really take a serious look at over the next year. As we say, Peggy Dole just said in the comments that she's seeing promoters aren't expecting anything to come back in earnest until 2022, which is really scary. That's 2 years of
Right.
loss of the live industry. So
Right.
how do
So,
you
I mean,
replicate that? How do you replicate that intimate experience if you're Taylor Swift, if you're BTS, if
then
you're Garth
but
Brooks?
we always talked about one of the, and then, Tom, do we have time for questions? And how late, are we allowed to run over or we're not allowed to run over? Oh, he's nodding. We can run over a little bit. Yes. No. Yes. Anyway, I saw you nod. I'm going to hold you to it.
I'm watching the questions and I'm bringing
Okay.
them
And
in,
I
so
want,
you just
yeah, I
do
want
it.
to get some of the questions.
Yeah.
One of the things that this is again a side story. It's interesting how it comes back at you. There was an artist that I worked with that was a member of the Beach Boys band years ago, and he wrote me about a year ago and asked me to help him see if I could help him with his new music. And I wrote him. We went back and forth, and it faded. So now here's the smackdown. He was doing a living room concert. I signed on. I wrote, "Hi." He's saying hi to everybody around me. He basically slapped me for, oh, now you're showing up for my living room concert. Where were you a year ago?
Yeah.
It was very funny. And afterwards we talked, but I said, you didn't answer me. He goes, you didn't answer me. So it was a little bit of payback. I'd like to grab a couple questions if you could, Tom. Because I think you just have to work on the intimacy right now, and everything else will adjust itself. I started to say about digital scarcity, though. I don't want to lose that point. You can say that there's going to be a Taylor Swift event, and it's $500 a ticket, and it's only going to be 1,000 people. And those 1,000 people, they're super fans or whatever. It can be 500 people. Something that still maintains that it's special, and only a certain number of people can get in, because we've lived with this argument for almost 25 years that digital removed scarcity.
Right.
That everybody gets everything. And
well, here's a question: does StubHub get involved in that? Do we now have
not anymore? You heard what happened? No, you heard what happened to the StubHub guy. The StubHub guy bought StubHub back from the company that bought him 1 month before the pandemic.
Oh wow!
He's going bankrupt.
Oh wow! But there's still a resale market.
But there may be a resale market. There might be a resale market.
Are we going to be in the, so for sure, like I totally agree that, you can only have so many people in, in the VIP chat. There could be more in the audience, but to be in the VIP chat, maybe that's $200.
You can scale the house.
So are we going to have live stream tickets,
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
On the resale market going for thousands of dollars.
Absolutely. And the thing is, one thing you can't stop is me having 30 people outside, 30 people in the room here with me.
Yeah.
I may invite 30 of my friends over to come up with the $500.
And you could charge them for that too, right? Yeah.
Oh, exactly.
For sure.
So, but let's go to some questions, Tom. If you, anything, do you want to lead it or would?
Yeah, there's one that was early on, and that is, what do you two see as the biggest disruptor to the music industry in the foreseeable future?
Well, the pandemic is the biggest disruptor for sure. But I mean, I'm always going to say live streaming because I think we have not quite understood and felt the ramifications of how this is going to change completely everything. And we've only scratched the surface creatively of what we can actually do with it.
Right.
So
But I mean, live stream, I mean, again, Karen and I talked about this the other day. We were doing in Boston in the 70s, we were doing Little Feat live from the Orpheum Theater on BCN, with the understanding that once the show was pretty much sold out, Don Law, the promoter there, would allow us to announce what they referred to as an instant radio spectacular. Around 6, 7 o'clock, we could announce that at 8 o'clock, Little Feat will be live from the Orpheum. People were, people who couldn't get a ticket were excited to hear it. People who heard it got their tickets earlier the next time Little Feat came to town. 15 years later or whatever, Liquid Audio, Dick Wingate called me and said that Little Feat was doing a live Liquid Audio broadcast from the El Rey. It was now a global broadcast. I mean, the technology gets better. People get turned on to music. There's a venue down the street from us called Exchange LA. They've been recording EDM artists in VR in 360 for the past 2 or 3 years. Some people argue, well, if you see it in VR, you're not going to go to the show. I said, no, it creates an aspirational effect. People will, if it's great, people will want to be there eventually. But in the meantime, we can monetize all of this.
There's another question, Ted. Do you see the disruption hitting the live business as big as the disruption that Napster caused to the recorded side of the industry?
Oh, much bigger right now. I mean, you have, they're saying 90% of the independent the Troubadour here in LA could go dark permanently. The Viper Room could go dark. I don't think this is a nuclear winter where Napster, was a dirty bomb in one city. I mean, it's a whole different thing. I mean, Napster was a wake-up call, but there were things you could do to, basically recognize it and say, okay, we're going to, out of Napster, I believe came Rhapsody, which was 8 years before Spotify, in terms of, we're going to give you access to all the music in the world, but it's going to be a flat fee. And $10 a month is a fair number. So you could counter to that. I mean, what Karen was articulating and what we're all struggling with is, how do we counter program to a pandemic? And do we just get used to, I mean, I watched if you watch Global Citizen on Saturday, that was the Global Citizen concert. That was really, really good. Hi, Jim. I can't read the whole thing. I got to open the window here. I think there are going to be musical. There are going to be musical moments. There are going to be musical moments that are amazing that you wouldn't have been there for. So, seeing these people singing in a field up in the hills somewhere outside of LA was much more interesting than seeing them on stage in Central Park. For me, it was much more impactful.
yeah, I mean, I think the magic of live streaming is when you feel a connection. Either in the chat with other people or with the artist directly. Other than that, it's basically just live stream broadcasting, and that it feels like television, and nobody feels like they need to be paying for television. No one feels like they need to be paying to watch Coachella. Otherwise, Coachella would be charging a lot of money for their live streams, and they don't, because they can't. So I think that's sort of the challenge that we have to look at going forward, is how do we do these events at scale live and still have that feeling of intimacy, that feeling that of real connection and community,
Right.
which I think everyone's looking for. The one thing we're missing in our lives is community. How do you build that in at scale? It's a tricky question. That's where I've seen that's where the wallet's open.
Right.
If you can make people feel like they're part of something and give them fun ways to better their experience with money, they will spend it.
Jim mentioned here that he says we're not in control, the audience is in control. I'm saying, actually, no, the audience isn't in control now either. This is different than anything that has ever happened before. There's no leverage here. It's not that Live Nation has the leverage or Viacom there's no leverage here. The leverage is we're dealing with a situation that literally we have to make the best of a situation that we're helpless in. And how do we make music shine in the current environment? And the environment hopefully will change. and people will get smarter and they'll wear masks, and we'll be able to go to a show and everybody will naturally not want to sneeze on the person next to them.
Hopefully.
Hopefully we'll get there. But right now it's connect with your fans in the most organic way that you can and then build on that. But again, you mentioned Taylor Swift. We went to see Taylor Swift at the Rose Bowl last year. I think it was last year. She had dancers, she had background singers, she had fireworks, she had everything. For me, the biggest connection was when Taylor Swift came out with an acoustic guitar and stood on the edge of the stage and just played voice and guitar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and she's extraordinary at connecting with fans, and she's extraordinary at connecting with a whole stadium of people. It's really been her magic and her longevity. Anyway, Tom, we're at 12:01. I don't want to step over your time.
Well, I appreciate that very much. We do need to wrap it up. I want to say thank you to both of you. You're absolutely pros in every respect of the word. Peggy Dold said something a moment ago in the chat that made me smile, and that is she was thanking me for not charging $500 to hear you two rock stars talk. And so that's
yes, we're doing the Chuck Berry thing, and we're both sending you an invoice for this.
Well,
anyway, I really appreciate it. This was great, Karen. Thanks for doing this, and brings back a lot of good memories.
Yeah,
and
it's like the old days. We look. Ted and I did this, for hours, just hanging out and talking and working with each other, and debating what was what with what was going on and where it was going. It was some of the funnest times we had. Was doing that, and also just going to see movies. We went to go see Super Size Me 2, or what was that one that we saw? We saw the one about
the greatest movie ever sold.
That was so good. That was so good. By the way, never see a movie with us because we talk through the whole thing. It's hilarious.
But here's the thing: we end up going to see a movie about Morgan Spurlock. A year later, I'm asked to interview him. We both have tried to hone our chops on interviewing, and we're sitting down there for the beginning of the interview, and I don't give questions out in advance. I turned to him and I said, so I guess the first question is, who called who first? And he says, One Direction called me. One Direction called me. I was amazed. He knew what I meant. He had done the documentary on One Direction. He said, Katy Perry had called me. I said, no. Justin Bieber called. I said, no. But all I said to him was, who called who first? Mm-hmm. And he got it. And on the way back, and this is when these things feel good, I get a text message from him. That was great. When you come to New York, let's get together. So, I mean, what we try and do is make the best of these, it's a combination of mentoring, helping, advancing, and sometimes sparring. And it's fun. And Karen's heard me say at times, if I was a different kind of person, I'd tell you what an idiot you are, but I'm not that kind of a person. So I'll just say, I think you need to rethink this. That's my closing remark.
Well, let me wrap it up by again saying thank you to Karen. You did a masterful job of keeping Ted on task as you knew you could. And thank you for everything you've done for the last 40 years for the music industry. And folks, we appreciate your continued support of this series. We're going to keep doing these, and we're going to give you a little bit of preview of the next week's session, featuring two more rock stars, Nashvillians they are, Mark Montgomery and F. Reed Shippen Jr. That's going to be a dramatically explosive conversation. And then in 2 weeks, we are featuring two events in the same week. We are going to have Bob Lefsetz back in the interview seat. As Karen has come back today, Bob Lefsetz is going to interview Mark Geiger. And that's going to be a really, really interesting one.
That's going to be amazing. I have one. I feel like Columbo. Wait, one more thing here for 1 second. I'm wearing a Lyric Find shirt. Those of you who know Daryl Ballantyne. I met Daryl. The other piece of advice I give you: talk to everybody that you can when we are seeing each other in person or in these virtual environments. As people know, Daryl walked up to me in 2003 at Canadian Music Week, asked if he could come to LA and intern at EMI for us. It's now 2020 and I've been on the board for 15 years and I'm on retainer with my intern. So there is an upside, there is a emotional upside to mentoring and helping and paying it forward. And in some cases, it also works out really well the other way. So thanks to everybody. I'm sorry. I had to jump back in with that. I wanted to get that across.
Good stuff. That's it.
Thanks for having me, Tom. I super appreciate it. This has been a spectacular series, and I'm really enjoying being a participant as well as a speaker.
Well, thanks so much. You guys are both awesome. Stay safe, stay healthy, wear your frickin' masks. Okay? And I'll see you next time. Thank you.
You got it. Thanks.
Bye, everybody.